children that you're working with, those mistakes have to happen for him. It's just he hasn't learned yet, or he's still learning, right? And that can be some language you're using with the class. Oh, they're still learning. Let's help them. How can we help them, keep learning, right? And think of some ways that might even be helpful for them, right? Great question, Brianne. I want to go in order here. This is getting really, do behaviors that really trigger children run. I feel like we kind of comply with the request or instruction. Comply with the request or instruction. All right. Now, it's important to really think about our mental models for this. Like, are the things that we, because a lot of times our triggers come from our mental models, the things that we kind of grew up just believing, or that were often as a result of the way that we were parented, some of the media, and our education. And then we take that with us. I'm actually at a conscious discipline conference right now. And someone was talking about this this morning, and she was saying how, she lives alone, and she gets triggered when she has to take the trash out and pull the trash back in. And she's only triggered by it because her mental model is that as a woman, she shouldn't be doing that. That's a guy should be doing that. A male should be doing that. So she gets triggered, and she's, conscious and aware enough to recognize her emotions and kind of like regulate, like, okay, accept the moment as it is, like, this is just a trigger. I can breathe. I don't have to react and kick over the garbage can because I'm frustrated or I'm triggered by this mental model. But we all have these things, and so a lot of things, children need to be seen, not heard. These are a lot of messages that we grew up with. So a lot of times when children aren't, they don't listen the first time, or they don't follow our direction or comply the first time, or they don't obey us 100%, we get triggered by it because we grew up, learning that children needed to be obedient, and, you speak when spoken to. But those aren't very helpful mental models to have. And, that's not really helpful for teaching children how to advocate for themselves, for teaching children how to, communicate. And they might not be complying for a reason, right? Like, the reason why they're having a hard time with the transition or not cleaning up is because they're so into their Lego fortress that they built, and they worked so hard on it. Imagine think about let's say you're going to put up a bulletin board, right? And you were so proud of it, and you looked up ideas, and you got all your little cutesy art things, and you worked hard to think of the idea for children to put on there, and everyone worked hard on it, and then you put it up, and then the next day your boss is like, all right, take all that down. We're not doing bulletin boards anymore. You're probably be a little frustrated by that, right? Like, I worked hard on that. And there might even be a very legitimate reason, like, oh, we actually realize that it's a fire hazard and we want to keep everyone safe. And you may even still logically understand that and know that, but that's still going to be really frustrating for you. And you, as an adult with a fully formed brain, you can do some perspective taking and be like, okay, well, it's not in the world. Like, I can do different things. We can make little books instead and have them on the bookshelf. It doesn't have to be hung up. I just attach to the idea because that's what I've always been teaching with. And that's part of my mental model. And so I can do it a little differently. And so really kind of check that in yourself, because we all got our own mental models. We all have our implicit biases. We all have our triggers. So check in with that. And know, and here's a really important thing about, children doing what we say, is that we know connection primes the brain for willingness. So, keep that in mind, that there may be a disconnect. And, it could also be like, yes, also kind of the system of the things, the routine, and how we're preparing them for the transition are all things that are impactful, and it can be ways that we can kind of prevent these transition struggles. But a lot of us are probably maybe already doing that. Maybe sometimes we forget, but no, connection primes the brain for willingness. And so one big thing, if you know a child who really has a hard time transitioning, one thing that I really suggest is, in that little 15, 10-minute, 5-minute, 1-minute, 30-second warning, because some children need more warnings than just the 5-minute warning, and also need visual warnings, a visual timer, so they can see the amount of time that's left, because children don't really do a great job they can't really grasp time. It's really abstract for them. And honestly, us adults don't really make it any better, because we say 5 minutes for everything. So a visual timer can be helpful. But what I really suggest is connecting with that child, being interested in what they're doing for the last, in that 15-minute span, and just coming in and just spending like a minute and just being interested about what they're doing. And talking about, okay, like when we clean up, what's going to be the plan? Are we gonna, and sometimes we can even like let's say it's like a Lego tower or something, we can save it and put it on the shelf and take a picture of it and say we're going to send it to mom or whatever, so you have it forever. Sometimes those things are helpful, because they're like, I worked hard on this, I just want to be able to save it. And I know that feeling, because like, have you ever been working on like a Word document, and then like something goes wrong and you lose all that work? Like, what a frustrating moment, right? That's what we ask children to do all the time, to kind of just etch and sketch all their hard work. And we may look at it like, oh, like it's just like a little Lego thing, like it wasn't that, but for them, like that took a lot of thought, and that's like the greatest of the skills that they have. And where's my daddy, mommy dinosaur gonna live if I take away the Lego piece? So for them, it can be, sometimes just because it's not a big deal to us doesn't mean it's not a big deal to them. Just gonna kind of scroll down here again. Oh, great. Did I actually hit everyone? Behavior that triggers, is to reduce destruction and anger that bolts up and doesn't want to express emotionally or connect. Okay, so if I'm understanding this correctly, you're saying your trigger is when a child doesn't want to open up and they've kind of like shut down. Lynn, if you can kind of clarify if that is, and I would kind of go again back, remember, like it's an indication that they're in a survival, that they're in a survival state, they're shutting down. Now, I want to give you a little bit more conscious discipline, like specific stuff to do here in kind of these different states. Visuals can be really helpful. Like all the things I showed you for the active calming, it's all visuals too, so that children can see it. Visual, and I mentioned the visual timer. Visuals can be really, really helpful, especially for children who are still, a little bit in that like emotional state. And also too, like for us too, so that we don't get in an emotional state when we are constantly repeating ourselves. Sometimes that's a trigger for us. Constantly having to repeat ourselves, and start, children asking us things 100 million times, that there's a way that we can put a visual there, so to communicate that information to them. Imagine, like, visuals are so important. Imagine, raise your hand or give me some kind of indication if you've ever been to an airport before. Have you ever like traveled or been to an airport? Yeah. Okay. So when you go to an airport, imagine if they had no signs or visuals. I know I would be lost. I would end up in Alaska, or I would end up in Ohio trying to get to Florida. Like, I would be lost. And more than that, imagine how frustrated all of the airport employees would be from people coming up and asking them questions, right? We have visuals everywhere, on the road. Imagine how many people would speed more if there wasn't a speed limit sign, right? Now people are still going to speed, right? I'm not telling you that the visual will eliminate the behavior that you don't want to see. I'm saying that it'll support children in the behaviors that we do want to see. And it's a support for you. Like, that's a part of your classroom environment. I always say that's like your third teacher, your second teacher. That's a co-teacher too. So think about that. Another thing that's often like a trigger for us is tattling. Does anyone get triggered by like tattling? Like, so and so touched my breath. Does anyone ever? Yeah. Sometimes that can be triggering. And for tattling, like, let's say someone comes up to you and they're like, so and so did this. We want to teach children how to advocate for themselves too. Like, we want to teach them that skill, right? So we don't want to always go in there and save them. And also too, it helps us too. So because over time they are better at solving their own problems, right? So we can ask them, did you like it? And I'm probably gonna say no. Oh, we'll tell them, I don't like it when you take my toy, or I don't like it when you touch my hair, or whatever it is. And they'll go in and be like, I don't like it when you touch my hair, right? And they might yell. I wouldn't even stress out about it, because you're building the skills, and we can't, they're not going to be perfect at it. We can work on tone and all that stuff later. But in that moment, like, they're advocating for themselves and they're really frustrated. So, it might come out, I don't like it when you take my toy, and that's a lot better than, right? Which is what children do when they don't have the language to say that, to advocate for themselves, right? Choices are also really important. Now, choices, sometimes we use the right tools at the wrong time. When a child is in a survival state, melting down, shutting down, like, choices are probably that's not a good skill to use at that time. In an emotional state, it can be effective. But, sometimes when they're really in it, and they're really like, they're pounding the ground, the best thing that we can do is to one, regulate ourselves, first thing, right? Always, because there's this thing called emotional contagion, where we catch emotions of other people. And there's a very real survival reason why this happens, right? If a baby is in distress, they cry and they scream so that the caregiver can be in distress and figure out what's wrong, so that can help them, they can fix what's wrong and then help them with whatever's wrong, right? There's a reason why we have this emotional contagion exist, a practical reason. Now, we can understand that, but that doesn't mean that we have to always be, when they're overwhelmed and yelling, that we have to be pulled into it. First, we breathe into the nose, out through the mouth, expand your belly. Expand your belly when you breathe inwards, like, and that's why the star breathing is like this. So it goes, right? So we breathe, we regulate ourselves so we can get up into our executive state, so we can access our skills, so we can be helpful in the moment. We describe what they're doing, like, your fists are going like this and your eyebrows are going like this. And what's likely going to happen in that time, the child's likely going to look at you because they're curious, like, going like, what? Right? Looking at you. And at that moment, they look at you, especially if they make eye contact, take a deep breath in. And what you're doing there is you're downloading calm, right? Because we have these mirror neurons where we see someone else do it, it can trigger us to kind of do the same thing, right? And sometimes you notice in a meeting, one person takes a drink of water, other people will take a drink of water. You notice also too, like, circle time, or some situation where children sit down and one child gets up and starts running. other children are like, ooh, that kind of looks pretty good. Like, something I want to do, right? This can happen too with breathing. So we want to take a deep breath in and out, and to download calm into them, right? And help them regulate, right? And what we can do as we kind of move them up, and as they start to regulate themselves too, because what's important also to notice is to notice body language and notice kind of what state they're in, really looking at their body language. Because just because we describe what they're doing and we breathe doesn't mean they actually are regulated. They might need a little bit more time to regulate. They may need to do a little bit of something. They need to move around a little bit. They may need to go on a walk a little bit before you talk about what happened and what we can do next time, right? And also too, whenever it is a situation where a child, hits another child, go to the victim first and make sure that they're okay, because we want to show that that is what we value, right? So go to the victim first and care for the victim first. Conscious discipline talks about the 7 skills that we need. And I'm not going to go super deep into it because it's, I'm at a conference and it's like a 4-day conference and we barely even kind of scratched the surface of the 7 skills. But just so that you know, composure, assertiveness, choices, empathy, encouragement, positive intent, and consequences are one of the skills. But like someone said this weekend, we tend to talk about consequences last because, and to quote her, if your heart ain't right, you ain't gonna do it right. And really, your state, and really what I want you to take out of that is that your state is going to impact how you approach the situation. So really monitor your state, and really practice regulating your state and kind of getting up in that executive state yourself, because you're, starting to go into consequences and get into punishments very quickly, especially when we're frustrated and upset and we're projecting our own emotions that we feel uncomfortable with, that we don't know how to express in a healthy way, that we don't know how to deal with in a healthy way. So we do the same thing as the kids do when we lash out. And we got the power as teachers. And so when we lash out, you may think that, that child who's hitting, their peer is just, destroying the fabric of the community that we're trying to build. But when we lash out, that impact is exponential because the children are learning from us. And they start to, and especially if it's a person that we're lashing out to consistently, that name, Maxwell Johnson, you start to hear the children, say that, Maxwell Johnson, you're bad, or a visitor comes in the classroom, they're showing the child around, they're showing the visitor around, like, oh yeah, that's Max, but he's bad, right? And of course, if people are calling me bad or seeing me bad, and then I make a mistake, there's a lot on the line. Being disconnected from the group. Being disconnected from the group means death in our brain. We need the group, the unity, to be able to belong with each other and be able to connect with each other. So really, like when they're struggling with it, it's important. It's really important to model empathy, show empathy, and talk to children about, how can we help, right? You might have children who have, you might have a child who has a speech delay in your class, who may not be able to advocate for themselves in the same way as the rest of the children. How can we help that child? How can we really listen to that child? Like maybe that child has a different cue. And to know that, that child might need something a little different, right? that's equity, right? Not equality, right? And a way to explain that, right? A way to explain the difference. If I were to give, let me ask you guys, if I were to give everyone a size 5 women's shoe, we'll say 2 shoes. You need 2 shoes. 5 size or size 5 women's shoes. I'm giving a 5 size women's shoes to everyone. Is that going to be helpful for everyone? No, it's not. Right? You need the size that fits you. Right? And equality says give everyone the same thing regardless. Equity says give people what they need. Right? And so those children might need a little bit more. And it's okay to say that. We're here to help. So yeah, let's wrap up and kind of like do any kind of final questions, because then I will do I will close out kind of the big overarching theme here. DCM is offering complex needs funds to help in classrooms. Yeah, and here's the big idea. Here's the big idea. We're all out here doing our best. The parents, you guys as teachers, the children in the classroom. And what will help us improve is being connected to the group and being able to make mistakes and to learn how to make mistakes and to learn how to improve. And when we get into this reward and punishment and gold stars, we feed into this like perfection mentality, but you got to get it all right, or marks off, or got it wrong, right? And very much this is, we brought it, I don't know if it was someone brought it up earlier. He made a good point, like there's a system that they're going to go into that is also, the factory model of education that also doesn't give children what they need. We kind of look at children all the same and kind of shuffle them through. And there's a little bit of that that's changing. And sometimes the urge, the temptation is to, I need to prepare them for what they're going to experience in public school, right? First of all, we don't know what they're going to experience, right? They could have a teacher who is really conscious and really aware and has really been doing the work and learning the triggers. They could, and maybe they won't. But I'm not going to, cause harm to a child, or I'm not going to cause harm to a child just because I expect that they're going to be harmed later on in life. And the younger they are, the more formative this time is for them. And so knowing that they're going to go into a system that is very punitive, that is very reward and punishment focused, that does shame children, that that doesn't see, that may not see individual needs, that's even more of a reason for us to do it. That's even more of a reason to build within them the empathy, right? And we don't teach empathy by just reading some books about empathy. We teach empathy, we give them empathy by showing empathy, by modeling empathy. That is how it is instilled within them. So be aware of your own triggers, your own stuff that's coming up, because it will come up. You're a human in this society. We all got biases. We all got triggers. That's okay. Children and the children in our classroom will have it too. So avoid being a perfectionist, be an improvementist. The goal isn't to be perfect every day. The goal is to improve a little every day. Model making mistakes. Normalize making mistakes. Say, oops, made a mistake. It's okay, we can do such and such. Practice how to repair making mistakes. What can we do to make it better? And it's not always necessarily just, I'm sorry. It could be a hug. It could be inviting the child to play. It could be drawing them a picture. Often children will come up with lots of ideas outside of just saying, I'm sorry. But teach them the process of making mistakes, because I promise you, they're going to be making mistakes for the rest of their lives. Oh, looks like we got. Can I read? I'm going to read your thing out loud, Brianne, just to the group. Brianne says, thank you so much for this, Mr. Chazz. I love how you interwove building community through natural consequences. I struggle with what other children will internalize when they see another child cause harm, but it helps me so much to view more as when I can understand the behavior better, I can frame it better, not just for myself, but for the child causing harm and the child being harmed. And reframing it for the child, calling that child bad, that child actually needs equity, and asking them, how can we as a person or a class community help them, is so helpful. What a wonderful way to bring together empathy without feeling the pressure as a teacher to be punitive. Thank you. That touched me. I noticed that you really synthesized the whole conversation together. And that was really insightful to Brianne. That touched my heart. Happy to hear how you received it. And like, I think that is just copy and paste that, what Brianne just said, stick it on your wall, just read it in the morning, and take some deep breaths, because it really does start with us, and they're learning from us. So we don't got to be perfect, just got to improve, be an improvementist. And that's my time. Actually, I know that's my time, but I'm going to do one more thing for you guys, because I just feel a little inspired. Can I, 2 more minutes? I'm just going to go ahead and just take it until someone tells me no. See, look, sometimes you got to push the boundaries, right? This is the human thing. I'm like a kid. But feel free to hold the boundary and I'll listen to it. All right, on with the thing. I'm actually going to do a little bit of spoken word to kind of share a little bit about my vision. And it's kind of 2 reasons I'm doing this. 1, to communicate to you, and 2, sometimes people receive things in different ways. And instead of expecting children to adjust the way that they learn to the way that we teach, we should adjust the way that we teach to the way that children learn. And so sometimes we have to be creative in how we're communicating a message, or do it a different way, or role play, or sometimes it's books, you're modeling it. So I'm going to do a spoken word for you guys, and then I will end it with that. If you play back the story of our lives, you'll realize that most of us grew up feeling unseen. So we hid scenes of our lives for fear of being shamed into feeling obscene. So instead of walking in the wisdom of our parents and our great-great-grands, we danced into trouble to the tune of Parents Just Don't Understand. But I envision a world where children truly feel seen by adults, where they feel safe to make mistakes and they can embrace their faults. I envision a world where children can be vibrant or silent, where adults choose guidance over violence, where we build a foundation of trust that elicits an alliance over a defiance. Come build that world with me. And you can snap.
Yeah. Wow. Wow, Mr. Chazz Lewis. what an incredible way to close out such a powerful presentation. We want to build that world with you. Thank you so much for everything that you have brought to us today. I don't know about anyone else, but I have like 2 pages of notes just scribbled everywhere from all the wisdom that you brought to us today. Just so powerful. Thank you so much. I would love for people to stay connected to you. I would love to stay connected to you. I'm going to put in the chat Mr. Chazz's website here at Linktree.
Yeah, and let me kind of tell you guys where to all find me and keep up with me and continue learning and continue your journey with me. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, a little bit on LinkedIn, but mostly those 3 spaces in terms of social media. I put out videos a lot right now. This Conscious Discipline Conference, I'm sharing a lot of the conference, and I got some special permissions to share and like do some videos where other people aren't allowed to. And so like I try to do stuff like this a lot and really just give a lot of free content for people to help them on their journey. Quite honestly, the tickets here are like $300. Like it's expensive, but it's worth it. But I say all that to say that if you go on my social media right now, and I'm going to create highlights, especially on Instagram, you can go through and look at the stories and see some of the slides and some of the speakers and some of the snippets from the conference, so that you can get a little bit of that, even though didn't have to pay or anything like that. I also have a podcast called Mr. Chazz's Leadership, Parenting, and Teaching Podcast. And that's just me bringing people on who can help you on your journey. And we talk about a lot of things, a range of topics. And then I also do one-on-one because it's great to have like the social media stuff is great for like in the moment, like little snippets, you're busy, you get a little nugget that you can take with you. Podcast is great, better for nuance. And then I do the one-on-one coaching so that I can more individualize the conversations, whatever you're struggling with, and really work with you. And that is something that is paid because I can't scale out my time, unfortunately. When they get cloning machines, then maybe I can adjust it. But I do have like as of right now, I do have an affordable option for that. So that's where you can find me mostly. And I also have a YouTube channel for kids because I have a couple of like songs that are mostly focused on social emotional things and just helping children. So that's where you can find me.
Wonderful. Well, please stay in touch with Mr. Chazz. Check out his offerings. I just love so much of what you shared today, but particularly what I'm taking away is just that reminder of the brain states and how we can lend our state, our regulated state, to young children, and the power of emotional contagion. And it starts with putting on our own oxygen mask first and taking care of ourselves first. So
I want to add one more thing to that, because
please.
When people talk about self-care, and I know like sometimes people get triggered, that community care is really important too for teachers and leaders. That, sometimes we say, like, we tell teachers like, self-care. And like, sometimes we can feel a little, we need to be cared for too. Teachers need to be cared for as well. And so like, I just want to say that too. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to like cut you off, but that's something, that's probably a trigger of mine. Community care is really important. And I really, leadership, you're a leader, care for your teachers, because how you care for your teachers will impact how they care for the children. And in my position, we're in a pretty large company, and I was able to really see the impact, how the owner of a company impacts, all the way down the ladder, all the way down to how children interact with each other. So leaders, care for your teachers so that they can better care for the children. And now I'm done.
100%. Thank you for adding that, Chazz. So much gratitude to you and to all of you here who took time on a Saturday for this very important conversation. Many thanks to our ASL interpreters who are here today. I want to make sure I have everybody's name. Tamara, Emily, Karen, and Jillian, thank you so much. We will have a link to this recording, so I'll make sure everyone who registered for the event gets access to that recording. And the last thing I'll share in the chat is we have another Educator discussion series event coming up on June 7th about trauma-informed nutrition for young children. So have a wonderful rest of your weekend, everyone. I'll stay on a few extra minutes if anyone has any logistical questions or follow-ups. But other than that, thank you and have a wonderful weekend and keep doing the wonderful work you're all doing.
And if any of the deaf people would like to stay on, this interpreter can stay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tamara.
Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chazz.
It was a pleasure meeting everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.